One Good Thing by Jilly. We are doing a recipe today for you in our new OGT studios because we've had so many people request more information about how to make your own gluten-free bread. It's hard to come up with a good gluten-free bread, whether it's in the stores or the bakery or even making your own. So I challenged myself to do just that. And with the help of a lot of research on the internet and the comments on these different recipes I found, I feel like I've come up with the best recipe for gluten-free bread. And I call it Jilly's gluten-free bread that doesn't suck, because that basically says it all right there. If you know anything about gluten-free cooking, you can't just grab an all-purpose flour. You need to make a flour blend. And for years, that's why I kind of didn't want to get into trying to make my own, because I thought that sounded too complicated. But my son Kel has celiac disease, and I just always felt so bad that he wasn't having a delicious bread when the rest of us were. So I vowed that I would find a good recipe for him. So I decided to make my own flour blend. It's not that hard. I thought it was going to be a lot more difficult. But you can find almost all of these flours. I think you can find all of these flours in the grocery stores now because there are so many more options. And it's just simply brown rice flour, 1 3/4 cups. 1 1/3 cup of brown rice flour. The same amount of cornstarch, 1 1/3 cup, and the same amount of tapioca flour. And all of these I found in my local grocery store. They're easy to find nowadays. And the last is 1 tablespoon of potato flour. If you can't find that in your grocery store, you can actually take some dried potato flakes and put them in your blender and blend them up. That'll work just as well. And that's it. You've made your own flour blend for this delicious gluten-free bread that doesn't suck. So this is what you're going to be adding to the bread. But before we do that, so we're moving on to the bread section now. But the first thing we want to do before we move over to the KitchenAid is to get our yeast started, because that needs to get going before we put it in with the rest of our ingredients. So it's just one packet. One package is 2 1/4 teaspoons, but it's easier just to get the packages. I think most of us do. Although my mom used to have a big bag of it in her freezer, so 2 1/4. And then just put that into your 2 cups of warm water and get it going. And while that hangs out in our warm water, I'm going to take this bowl of our amazing flour blend, gluten-free flour blend, and we're going to get started on the rest. It's going to go in our KitchenAid. To our flour blend, we're going to add a few other dry ingredients, starting with 1 tablespoon of xanthan gum. This is the stuff that's going to make your bread a little bit chewy and stretchy, kind of like regular bread is. This is a really important ingredient in your bread. So 1 tablespoon of that, 2 teaspoons of just regular salt, 1/2 cup of dry milk, and then 1 tablespoon of, now this gets people confused. I'm going to say a little bit about it. It's gluten-free egg replacer. Later you're going to see in our wet ingredients that we actually have eggs in the recipe, but this is purely for texture. If for some reason you don't want to have it in, you don't have it on hand, you can leave it out, but it really does improve the texture. So that's 1 tablespoon of that. So there's your dry ingredients for your bread. Now we're going to move on to the wet ingredients. It's going to be, and this is really important. We get this question all the time. My bread didn't quite turn out, it didn't raise. You need to have your ingredients at room temperature. That includes your eggs, your butter, your honey, and even your apple cider vinegar, which I know I keep mine in the refrigerator. So you need to keep them all, need to have them at room temperature. That will make a big difference in how your bread turns out. So we're going to start out with 3 room temperature eggs. And I'm really not an expert at this, so don't judge me. And this is a 1/3 cup of honey, whatever honey you like. I get a organic. Local honey is always best, we know, but whatever honey you have on hand. So we're putting all of our wet ingredients right now into the KitchenAid. Half a stick or quarter cup of room temperature butter. Stick that in there, and 2 teaspoons of apple cider vinegar. And then we're just going to mix this up really lightly. It doesn't have to be super well mixed. All right, that should be plenty fine. Just 30 seconds to a minute. It's just to get it combined. The butter will actually still look chunky. That's fine. That's the way it's supposed to look. Now we're going to add our dry ingredients. I'm going to start with half of it. You don't want to put it all in at one time. You're going to have a big explosion mess. So that's about half. Get that in there. Just, whoa, a little bit slower than that. Until it's just blended, and then the other half. And give that a very slow stir until it is well combined, probably another 30 seconds. And then you can put it back down on the lowest setting. And we go over here and get our yeast that's been sitting out, getting all nice and ready for our bread. A little quick stir, and then I'm going to slowly add it as the machine stays on low. So, if you need a replacement for eggs, if you're allergic to eggs, you can also do a replacement of water and make a slurry with flaxseed. You can go to the website, and we have all the instructions on that, onegoodthingbyjulie.com, if you need to make it egg-free as well as gluten-free. And we have had so many positive comments on this bread. I mean, it really almost brings you to tears if you're gluten-free or if your family is, because it's so hard to find a good gluten-free bread, and this really is a good one. All right, I'm gonna give it a little bit more of a stir without letting it go over the sides. And then I'm gonna put it on medium. I'm gonna let it go for 4 minutes. I know that sounds crazy when you're making bread. This is gluten-free bread, so the rules are all different. You're gonna let it mix in here for 4 minutes before you put it in your pans. So in 4 minutes, we'll put it in our pans. All right, that's been 4 minutes mixing at medium speed, and we are ready to put it in our pans. This is not going to be a batter or dough that you've seen before for regular bread. It looks a lot like a cake batter, but I promise this is what it's supposed to look like, and it's going to turn into delicious gluten-free bread. So you can see it kind of looks like a cake batter there. So I'm going to take 2 bread pans that have been sprayed with cooking spray, whatever you usually use to put in your pans, and we're going to divide it in half into these 2 pans. It's tricky when you're not kneading it and rolling it into a ball like you usually do a loaf of bread. So I'm going to show you a trick that makes all the difference. And I think that looks about like it's half and half, maybe a tiny bit more in this one. All right. So in order to make it look really nice and smooth like a regular loaf of bread, all I do is just get my fingers wet with a little bit of water and smooth it down. And then it gets nice and loaf-like. This works really well with a lot of different things that you're trying to work with bakery-wise, because it gets so sticky. And getting your hands wet is not going to affect the bread at all. It's just going to help you make a nicely formed loaf. So now we have our loaves ready to rise. This is just part of the process, and it needs to rise for about, I think I end up doing it for an hour, 50 minutes to an hour. And you want to try and put it in a warm part of your kitchen if you have such a thing. If it's kind of chilly in your kitchen, you might want to even put it in the oven. But I find that if I just set it on top of the stove, leave it there for about an hour, 50 minutes to an hour. You want to wait until it's risen about an inch above the pan. in the middle, and then it's going to be good to go. So we'll finish it off then. So I allowed the bread to rise until it was about 1 inch above the pan in the middle, not on the sides because that would make it go off to the side. And then I baked it in a 375-degree oven for between 45 to 55 minutes, but you're gonna have to watch it. When it's about this much done, brownness, you're probably gonna wanna take it out. But here's a foolproof way to know if your gluten-free bread is done. It's an instant read thermometer. If you stick it into your bread and it reads 200 degrees, you're good to go. It's a foolproof way because it's kind of hard to know when gluten-free bread is done. But other than that, the 45 to 55 minute range is probably going to be good enough for your bread if you don't have a thermometer. But 200 degrees is what you're shooting for. Then you want to remove it from the oven, let it stay in the pan for 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, remove it to a cooling rack and let it cool completely before cutting into it. I can't stress this enough because people get really anxious to eat it and they try cutting into it and it just falls to pieces, especially gluten-free bread because it's got a much different texture and consistency. So let it cool completely, and then when you're ready to cut it, let your knife, and I don't have a big knife today with me, so we're gonna have to use this little one, but let your knife do the work for you and just let it run along. Don't push down at all. And you'll end up with this beautiful gluten-free bread. I swear the first time I tried it, I almost cried because I was so happy. It was, instead of tears of frustration, it was tears of joy because it tasted like bread, honest to goodness bread. So give it a try. I really hope you'll love it as much as me and my family do. Go to onegoodthingbyjilly.com for all of the instructions and for lots of other great ideas.